Hello, let's talk about the Barbie movie. Originally, I was going to review it, but I've changed my mind. I'd like to talk about the discourse, which has been few and far between, but it's been enough to catch my attention. The discourse regarding Barbie's sexuality in the Barbie movie. A lot of people, including Margot Robbie, have been discussing asexuality and aromanticism as a possibility for Barbie, and I kind of wanted to dissect that just a little bit and then see what other people think. I'm not an expert, so I did a little bit of research just to see what the current landscape looks like, and it is a little bit dire, I'm not gonna lie. The question here is Barbie really asexual, or do we just want her to be? Back in March, Margot Robbie was on the Vogue podcast called The Run Through. And she basically said that Barbie doesn't have reproductive organs. If she doesn't have reproductive organs, would she even feel sexual desire? No, I don't think she could. She can't smell pheromones because she's immune, so I guess she doesn't have that sexual urge. But does that really make Barbie asexual? And if Barbie becomes a real girl at the end of the film, does that mean she's no longer asexual or possibly aromantic? What about Ken? If we can agree that the dolls are asexual, does that mean Barbie is only aromantic? Since Ken is constantly competing for Barbie's attention, but Barbie only cares about her friends, does that mean that Ken is asexual with romantic feelings towards Barbie? And then Barbie is an asexual and aromantic person? And there are a lot of questions to answer here, a lot of different ways that we could analyze what's been going on in the film, in the discussions around the film, and the actors and the writers. Let's start with other representations of asexuality in film and media. All of the characters that we ascribe asexuality are given that title by fans and asexuals who identify with those characters. They are very, very rarely ever stated as asexual in the media that they're in. Examples include Data of Star Trek Next Generation, SpongeBob SquarePants from SpongeBob, Ozymandias from the Watchmen film and the show, Sherlock Holmes from specifically Sherlock the show, even Daryl from The Walking Dead. Many of these characters are praised as asexual by asexuals. Many of the characters who are praised as being asexual are not confirmed asexual, but Todd from BoJack Horseman and Drea from Everything's Gonna Be Okay are both currently canonically confirmed asexual characters. Those are the only two that I found that I had heard of. Every other example of an asexual character was from something kind of nuanced and maybe didn't have the biggest fan base. But these shows were more popular and got quite a bit of attention, especially Todd from BoJack Horseman. The voice actor Aaron Paul said in an interview that he felt so inspired and moved by all of the people who were asexual who reached out to him and said, hey, I wouldn't have known that I was asexual. I needed this representation, and thank you so much for being part of this community and leading this community through this character. And he felt very honored by that, and that was very wholesome to read about. Aaron Paul seems like a very cool guy. Most representation of asexuality is still very heteronormative and male and white. And I think it's mostly because a lot of these characters are also autistic coded, which I'm not going to get into in this particular video because I feel like I kind of only wanted to talk about the sexuality of Barbie and not necessarily her neurodiversity, but I will be linking a video that goes over the connections between autistic coded characters and ace coded characters, and that will be in the description of this video. So in my opinion, a lot of these characters aren't necessarily normal people, and they're either cerebral geniuses who are barely human due to their intelligence or actual android status like Data, or they're infantilized by their lack of sexual or romantic attraction or their incapability of finding a partner like SpongeBob. Because asexuality in media tends to coincide with dehumanization, which is another really big point from Rowan's video, which I will be linking. Because asexuality tends to coincide with dehumanization, asexual people may be jaded towards the idea of considering all of Barbie Land's inhabitants as asexual just because they're dolls. I would agree with that. I would agree. It's kind of like asexuality is more than being an object. It would be like me saying right now, oh my gosh, wow, there's so many asexuals in the room with me right now. And I look at every single book on my shelf as an asexual because they aren't sexual beings. Like, that doesn't make sense. I think what we can actually dissect in this representation is the cinematography surrounding Barbie and the portrayal of Barbie in the film, which is, to me, seemingly not gendered, which is very exciting. I really enjoy non-gendered filmmaking. I feel like it's very powerful and it's more inclusive to the basic viewer. Like, and when I'm talking about this, I mean the actual positioning and movement of cameras doesn't seem masculine or feminine or necessarily heteronormative in this case. It follows the character and what their objective is and how they feel, rather than the sexuality or beauty of them or their body. I do want to clarify, though, that cinematography not being suited to the male gaze doesn't mean that it's necessarily now a female gaze. That's not really how, like, I would, like, categorize different types of filmmaking. Just because it's not necessarily male doesn't mean it's female. They're not necessarily opposites. And it's very wide and complex. And I don't think that it's necessarily right to be like, oh, well, if it's not the male gaze, then it must be the female gaze. I don't think so. So if we look closer into the thoughts and feelings of stereotypical Barbie, which is Margot Robbie's Barbie, she cares deeply for her friends and everybody who lives in Barbie Land, and she ensures that they're all doing things that they enjoy. So they're doing the jobs they like, they have a government, they have a system, and she kind of made it possible for that to happen being the first Barbie, if that makes sense. For her, every night is girls' night, and so that leads to the ignoring of her boyfriend Ken, who's kind of been assigned to her, you know? When Ken existed as a Barbie, you can imagine if you're looking at what Barbie Land would have looked like in whatever year Barbie was created, it was just Barbie with her sunglasses, right? Coming into this existence. And so over time, they're adding more things to it and it's becoming more and more fleshed out. And so when they added Ken, she's just been assigned this boyfriend. And that's kind of, I think, the way that it's being depicted in the movie is just assigned boyfriend. In the film, when Ken proposes, like, hey, I think I should spend the night tonight, she's confused and doesn't understand why. And he is also, but he thinks that it's something that they're supposed to do. It's very clear that Ken has romantic feelings towards Barbie. He's always trying to impress her. He's competing for her attention. He tries to kiss her multiple times and she is not interested. She sees Ken as more of a friend than anyone else. She the only thing that really separates him from all of the other people who live in Barbie Land is that he's a boy and that he is technically her boyfriend. And she doesn't really differentiate him in any other way. They don't really act like a couple. They don't do any coupley things. I don't know. They're kind of going through the motions, and Barbie is very clearly more interested in friendship than anything else. And I think that's a lot of why people are thinking, oh, well, maybe she's asexual. She doesn't have interest in having like romantic or sexual relationships. Her behavior can be contrasted to Ken's behavior because they're both dolls. So if we're saying, okay, we're just going to accept that the dolls are supposed to be asexual because they aren't humans. Okay, sure. But when you look at Ken and he has romantic attraction towards Barbie, that implies that they also have other types of attraction if we're ignoring sexual attraction. So aesthetic attraction, perhaps, romantic attraction, platonic attraction. Clearly, Barbie has platonic attraction for all of her friends. So if we're kind of breaking it down in that way and we're just ignoring the sexual component of that, there are other types of attraction that exist in Barbie Land, which is great. So then we can kind of compare and contrast amongst the dolls. Ken is comparable to Barbie in that he is attracted to her, she's not attracted to him. But what we have to ask ourselves is she not attracted to him because she's not attracted romantically to anyone? Or is she not attracted to him because she's just not into him? Is there a different Ken that she would maybe enjoy? And that's kind of the one thing that is kind of leading me to not say necessarily that Barbie is ace or aro. Or aro. I don't know if it's aro or aro. I'm just gonna say aro because aro is a Twilight villain. I just remembered that the Twilight books are there. So I guess for me, when I kind of look at this topic, I think it'd be really interesting to be able to talk to Margot Robbie, Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach, I think that's how you say his name, Baumbach. Talk to them and ask them, you know, did you have asexuality in mind when you were creating the Barbie character? Because, like, the idea that Barbie is not sexual but is sexualized can be applied to, like, many women and girls who are just going about their lives doing what they enjoy, not because they're trying to appeal to someone's sexual gaze, but because they're just doing what they like. I'd also want to know whether Barbie's asexuality, and if we're going to assign her asexual and aromantic tendencies, then, you know, would that be the same when she becomes a real girl at the end of the film? Is her going to the GYN, does that mean that she's interested in sex, or is she just getting a checkup because now she's a real woman and has a vagina and reproductive organs? Like, what does that mean for her no longer being inhuman and being a human? Because that's the main difference in what we see in other examples of asexuality. So, like, let's take Data from Star Trek, for example. There's so much debated during all of his story arcs about, you know, what kind of rights does he deserve as an android? Is he sentient? Should we treat him like he's a person even though he's not? Does he have sexual attraction? Does he have platonic attraction to people? What makes him valuable? What makes him valuable to us as humans? And is it that he's our friend, or is it that he's our servant? And kind of just differentiating, you know, is this being a slave, or is this being able to decide what it wants? And, you know, that's like a really interesting thing to explore in Star Trek, and I really enjoyed a lot of those story arcs. The only thing was that, you know, Data did have a sexual relationship with one character, and it's implied that that sexual experience makes him more human, which kind of further dehumanizes people who are ace, which is like a really interesting thing to go over and think about. I think analyzing that is interesting because Barbie is in this rare position in that she stops being the android and starts being the human, in that other android characters haven't had. Apart from me, perhaps the character from Bicentennial Man, played by Robin Williams. That character was an android who became confirmed sentient and had romantic attraction and things like that. So that's like kind of related, but like not really. And because like if the topic is asexuality, then it doesn't really count. But that is something interesting. You know, it's very much about like, do we respect this thing because it's human-like, or do we respect it because it's sentient? You know? I'd also be really curious to know, you know, is Barbie just not into Ken because she's not into Ken, or is she not into Ken because she's not into romance? I think that would be a really interesting thing to explore. I don't think that there will be a Barbie 2. I almost hope not, because I like the way that it ends. I like that I can have a bunch of different opinions and have any of them be right in this video. I like being able to decide things and not know the right answer. I think sometimes that's more fun and more challenging to the viewer. Because Barbie has not been confirmed canonically that she's asexual or aromantic, she's just going to be kind of on that long list of people who are asexual coded, and we can diversify that list all we want, but the list I think that matters most to actual asexuals is the list that is canonically asexual, such as Drea, such as Todd. Another YouTube creator, Roman Ellis, made this really, really excellent video about representation for asexuals in media, and I will be linking it. I've referenced it multiple times throughout the video. It's just such a great resource for me, and I really enjoyed new examples of asexual coded people who I hadn't realized before were asexual coded. I referenced Daryl from The Walking Dead earlier in the video, which is not referenced in her video. That's the one character that I think I had thought of beforehand, and the reason I chose him is because the actor who plays Daryl said, you know, I consider him an asexual person, which, you know, like, that's fun. I like it when actors have that in mind and can have their character seem like a real and normal person. I think Daryl is not a real or normal person. He's very unique in that he's sort of a virtuoso in what he does, and I think that can sometimes also walk hand in hand with someone being autistic coded and asexual coded at the same time, which is kind of part of the problem with dehumanization. But you know, if you love a character and they're beloved to you, then you don't see them as dehumanized. You see them as special to you. You see them as amazing in either what they do or who they are. And I think sometimes when it comes down to it, that's more important to the individual media enjoyer. Either way, I've really enjoyed talking about this topic. I really enjoyed researching it. I would love to make more videos about stuff like this. I'm a person who really enjoys separating sexuality from media, in that I think that using it as a plot point and using it as stakes is so whatever to me. It's not the kind of thing that entertains me. I don't think it necessarily hinders writing, but I think that my favorite stories are very disconnected from sex, disconnected from romance, even though I do love a good or bad romance. And I think the things to me that make a romance interesting, like my favorite romance, Pride and Prejudice, first of all, I will say I was attacked by the Barbie movie. A whole bunch of people on the row who I went to go see the movie with looked at me during like the depressed Barbie watching Pride and Prejudice thing. That was embarrassing. But Greta Gerwig knows who I am. She heard about me and she wrote it about me. So either way, my favorite aspects of Pride and Prejudice are not the romantic or sexual tension between Darcy and Elizabeth. It is the sisterhood between the sisters, the relationships that occurred and why. The betrayal of Mr. Bingley leaving and coming back and asking for forgiveness. I think those aspects of the human condition, making mistakes, coming back on it, misjudging people, being prejudiced against people, that is way more interesting to me than necessarily the romance. I think the romance is genius and it's very applicable to today, surprisingly, considering the time. And I think when you break it down, the story is beloved because it's so full. There's so much going on in it. It can apply to so many different people. It's timeless. And I think it's possible for the Barbie movie to be beloved in that way too. I think people 20, 40, 60 years from now might look back on the Barbie movie and go, oh, well, they got that wrong, but everything else is so good. You know, I like it when people can do that. I think it's so... I just like it when things age well. It's very nice. Actually, because I'm talking about it, I will link... There's this really excellent article about how Pride and Prejudice is so applicable to today. I will include that in the description as well because I really loved that article. Either way, I would really love to know what other people think about not just Barbie, but also the representation of asexual people. You know, are there any characters that you felt really connected to when you watched what it was? Did you connect that it was because you felt they were asexual coded, or was it because of some other reason? I would love to know. Either way.